Ah, the Christmas movie. One of the main ways to keep my love of Christmas going every year. As I get older and older, the magic of Christmas is kind of lost, even if I do still like spending time with my family. However, Christmas movies always spark this inner level of joy, and that's why I always rewatch my favourite Christmas movies and TV specials and shorts every year. Things like The Polar Express, Elf, Home Alone, The Snowman, Muppets Christmas Carol, Merry Christmas Mr. Bean, the Doctor Who Christmas specials, Die Hard, The Devil of Christmas, Bad Santa, Rare Exports, Harold and Kumar.
It's a very jolly day for you to die.
No shame! But my favourite Christmas movie is one that perfectly encapsulates everything special and magical about the holiday season. And that movie is the 2011 Aardman animated film, Arthur Christmas. Most popular Christmas stories have a main reason why they're loved and rewatched by many people. In the case of Home Alone, people love watching all the comedic slapstick. In the case of Die Hard, people love watching the gripping but fun action over and over again. In the case of myself and The Polar Express, I have immense nostalgia for the film, and rewatching it makes me feel young again. And in the case of all the Christmas Carol adaptations, people flock to see the wonderful and joyous story with one of the greatest messages in literature. However, in the case of Arthur Christmas, I rewatch it every year for not just one reason, but for all of the reasons I just mentioned, and as a result, I can confidently call it the perfect Christmas movie, because of how it expertly balances everything people love about Christmas, whilst adding in its own image. The main plot of Arthur Christmas is revolved around this movie's version of the Christmas operation, which makes some changes to what is generally known. In this film, Santa Claus is a title instead of a single person, and the current Claus, Malcolm, played by Jim Broadbent, has been doing the job for 70 years, and is expected to retire and hand over the mantle to his son Steve, played by Hugh Laurie. Meanwhile, there's also Malcolm's other son, Arthur, a clumsy, easily scared, but joyous person played by James McAvoy, who is by far the most passionate person about Christmas. However, after the Christmas Eve operation concludes, it is discovered that one child called Gwen was missed due to an error, so as a result, Arthur decides to go out and give the present to her, whilst accompanied by an eccentric rapping elf called Bryony, played by Ashley Jensen, as well as Arthur's grandfather, simply referred to as Grand Santa, who is not only played by Bill Nighy, but is the best character in the film. Just saying.
Don't matter what you come up with, son. You may be the next in line, but you'll never get to be Santa unless you knock him off.
Now, this is an admittedly simple story. However, it works really well as a Christmas movie, because it features all of the aspects people love about other Christmas films. It's funny, it's got great action, it's barely old enough to be nostalgic, and it also has a fantastic message which fits so well during Christmas time. However, it's one thing to say that this is the perfect Christmas movie, but it's irrelevant if I don't explain why. In this video, I will go over the 3 most important parts of the movie which make it a Christmas classic, and I will explain why they work so well. So, without further ado, let's begin. I think the best place to start with this film is its immense creativity made to tell a Santa Claus story like no other. With the Santa Claus mythos, there are a lot of questions left in the air to the point that no one really knows how the story really works. How does one guy deliver presents to every child? How does he do it in one single night? How do reindeers fly? How is this dude still alive despite being around for centuries? How is he delivered to homes without chimneys? Why are so many people okay with this guy breaking into their houses? How has he not been shot down when flying over restricted airspaces? And finally, why does he love Coca-Cola so much? However, what this film excels at is giving their own interpretations, explanations, and subversions to what is believed, which in turn gives this film its own creative identity amongst other Santa Claus movies. They still didn't explain why he loves Coca-Cola so much, but they got most of it. I already mentioned how Santa is a title in this film instead of a person, with St. Nicholas being the very first Santa. The original, you might say. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Instead of being on his own, Santa is now joined by an army of elves who can tackle multiple houses at once, and they travel around on a literal spaceship which can travel at the speed of sound, and can also disguise itself. So many questions about the Santa mythos are explained here, which I think is an important thing to do when this movie is directly focused on Santa Claus. If he was just a side character like in Elf for instance, then they could get away with keeping the mysteries. But when he's the main, it is important to bring them up, and this film uses this as a massive creative opportunity and just runs with it. Instead of leaving us to ponder about the operation, the film instead opens with a brilliant sequence focused on showing the Santa operation in just a single city. However, despite being a single city, the whole sequence is so fast paced, energetic and fun to watch. Not to mention the whole sequence is gorgeously animated. It's probably as good a time as any to briefly mention how good the animation is for this movie. Aardman is a studio well known for its stop motion animation. However, this film breaks the norm and is in full CGI. Now, I firmly believe that stop motion looks better than CGI any day of the week, but here, the CGI is still really good. Also, I was not a big fan of the look of Aardman's other CGI movie, Flushed Away. However, in this movie, it works for me, and I think the main reason for that is because of the radically different character designs, because in Flushed Away, the traditional Aardman style of character designs were replicated, and it just didn't look right in CGI. However, the characters look a lot better here. Just in general, the animation is just amazing throughout, with so many striking colours, great lighting, visual spectacles, and fast-paced action making the film a treat for the eyes, and this opening sequence just emphasises that. However, another thing this opening sequence emphasises is the humour, which is my second main point here, and is tied right in with the creativity. This film has an unprecedented number of laughs per minute, with many of them being so subtle that you don't catch them until your second or fifth viewing, which just enhances the rewatchability and is why I will never tire of rewatching it. This opening sequence specifically has so many bits of dialogue which took me a while to either fully hear or understand.
Wow, Clam Channel, this kid must have been good his whole life.
Yes, this film isn't Shaun of the Dead levels of new details being noticed every rewatch, but it is definitely up there. However, there are still plenty of in-your-face jokes present, and so many of them are top tier in the comedy department. I think the best showcase of the film's comedic tone is with Grand Santa. I swear, every single line this guy says is an absolute gem which leaves me on the floor laughing.
What if you do wake the odd nipper? A whack on the head with a sock full of sand and a dab of whiskey on the lips they don't remember in the morning.
I've always loved funny old characters, and Grand Santa is no different as this cynical and slightly bigoted old bloke.
It's impossible.
They used to say it was impossible to teach women to read.
Also, talking about him just reminded me that he does in fact address the question of whether Santa has ever been mistaken for a missile when flying over restricted airspace, and he answers it in the most absurdly humorous way possible.
I didn't know it was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I nearly started World War III.
Now, Grand Santa isn't the only funny character in this film, as all the other characters bring their own comedic talents. Arthur is great because he's definitely a lot more physical than the other characters with his bumbling movements and clumsiness. Bryony is very eccentric and crazy, which makes her so much fun to watch, and Steve is often a lot more serious, but that brings its own level of comedic value. Overall, this film is such a fun ride throughout, with plenty of hilarious moments with a lot of that Aardman charm, and I refuse to spoil any more jokes. Just watch the film for yourself. However, if this movie was all comedy with no further substance, I don't think I would be praising it as much as I am. Instead, Arthur Christmas has a really heartwarming message, coupled with the really lovable and relatable characters I already mentioned, and that is what makes it such a Christmas classic. But what is the message of this film, you might ask? As you can probably tell from what I've mentioned before, this film does not follow the traditional ideas of the Santa Claus story, instead has more of an emphasis on technology. This is best shown in the fact that the film has a giant spaceship for a sleigh with a full mission control where everyone has computers and smartphones. All of this was brought on by Steve, who essentially overhauled the whole Christmas operation to be as efficient and up to date as possible. I don't know about you, but even though it is radically different to what traditionally happens at Christmas, I can see where he's coming from when it comes to updating the operation. Population rates have been on a massive increase in the past centuries, and we even surpassed 8 billion people earlier this year in 2022. Alongside that, security in homes have gotten better as time has gone on, and less homes have chimneys to climb down. As a result of all of this, it makes total sense that Steve would move with the times and adapt to the changes, and will also try to make it as efficient as possible. However, Grand Santa is firmly against all the changes by Techno Tommy, and instead wishes that Christmas stays exactly how it was, with 8 reindeer, the traditional sleigh, and going down the chimney. Whilst this is great for tradition and is obviously very charming, the whole film shows us that this method really isn't efficient anymore. The old maps are horrifically outdated and didn't even know that Chicago existed.
I remember the first time I ran into Chicago.
Chicago wasn't on the map!
Can't say I blame it. Alongside the lack of decent navigation, the camouflage is pitiful and the safety is practically non-existent. Therefore, the old sleigh just doesn't work as well anymore. It's definitely dated a bit. So, as a result of all of this, you would think that technology is easily superior to tradition in this context. However, this film still firmly establishes that this is not the case. Whilst technology may be more efficient, the heart is kind of gone. Steve doesn't see Christmas as a time of holiday and family. Instead, he sees it more as just a job. Furthermore, he doesn't really care about the children despite them being the heart of the Christmas operation. Instead of referring to them by name, they are all given numbers. Even though Gwen's name has been mentioned many times, Steve still refers to her as 47785BXK. Yes, I've seen this movie so many times I know the number. Alongside that, Steve could not care less that Gwen has been missed and would much rather leave her instead of risking damage towards the S1, which is the name of the ship by the way. Even when Arthur and Grand Santa deliver the present themselves, he still demands they return at once because they're jeopardizing his entire perfect operation. Although, despite all of that, he is still sympathetic, as he does have the right to be worried about the operation going down the drain and being a repeat of 1816. I can also understand why he feels like his work has been invalidated, because even though the rest of the operation was a massive success, everyone is focusing all of their attention on a single tiny slip-up, which wasn't even his fault. All of this together shows us that Steve is a deeply flawed, but still sympathetic character. Despite being somewhat antagonistic in the story, and being a bit of a dick to Arthur at points, he is not the villain in the traditional sense. He is just a flawed man who goes through a character arc where he realizes that the importance of the Christmas operation isn't the operation part, but the Christmas part. Sorry, that was very cheesy, let me try that again. When he realizes that the importance of the Christmas operation isn't the fact that it is more efficient than ever, but instead the fact that it is bringing happiness to more and more children across the world. Christmas is a time of happiness for many people, and this realization from Steve as he watches Gwen's utter joy over her present emphasizes the importance of the holiday. And all of this links back to my main statement that Arthur Christmas is the perfect Christmas movie. However, Steve is not the only one who goes through a character arc based around the meaning of Christmas, as on the other side of the generation spectrum, we have Grand Santa, who also changes throughout the film. Somehow Grand Santa is able to portray both kinds of traditionalists. At first, he really doesn't care about Gwen getting a present and instead sees the journey as an opportunity to one-up Steve and show him how Christmas should really be done. This mirrors many traditionalists who are firmly against modern technology and culture in every way, to the point where they miss the point of their traditions. However, as the film progresses, Grand Santa becomes more caring and is soon willing to make the effort to actually deliver the present. Whilst he obviously prefers the traditional methods even by the end of the film, he does still care, and he certainly cared more than Steve did at this point in the story. This parallels many traditionalists who don't mind modern technology, but simply have a preference. I think this is important to establish because it shows that tradition is not a bad system either, especially because traditional methods can lead to a lot more care being put into something. Where it is a problem though, is when people refuse to make the effort to adapt, to the point where they just cause unnecessary conflict. As a result, Arthur Christmas doesn't paint either side in a positive or negative light, instead portrays them both as flawed but good in their own way, and lets the audience choose what they prefer. And this is further shown in the ending, where Arthur compromises and does a combination between efficiency and tradition. What the film does portray as bad, however, is the lack of care, which is what links back to my main point. Christmas is a time for giving, sharing, and caring. It shouldn't be a time for family bickering and trying to one-up each other, or trying to make everything go as perfect as possible. Let's be real. Christmas is messy. It never goes to plan, and there's always stuff which gets in the way, whether it's dry turkey, stupid queues when shopping, or getting ill around the holidays. That last one is the worst, trust me. And trying to keep everything perfect isn't important, and instead it's the thought that counts. If you make the effort, then that will mean more than trying to keep everything perfect, which is what Steve eventually learns. Meanwhile with Grand Santa, he learns that his petty feud and traditionalist views is just causing conflict. Instead, he should focus on what is really important, which is being jolly, kind, and caring, like he used to be when he was Santa. As a result, the film's portrayal of tradition versus technology is an important message, especially for this modern day and age. And whilst it would work well in any film, It is especially poignant in a Christmas film like this one, and is a major reason for why I consider Arthur Christmas to be a perfect Christmas movie. Following on from the arcs of Steve and Grand Santa, who represent the future and the past respectively, we have the present, which is shown through the current Santa, Santa the 20th, who I'm just going to refer to as Malcolm for simplicity as that's his name. Now, whilst Malcolm does play a part in the tradition versus technology debate as he's the middle ground who uses technology but doesn't fully understand it and reflects a lot of parents and grandparents, his main role in the film is something separate to this debate. Instead, Malcolm is a fantastic reflection of the impacts of legacies and idolization. Malcolm has been working as Santa for 70 years, and for all those years he has been bringing joy to children across the globe. The reason Malcolm has been doing it for so long is for multiple reasons, but the main reason is because he absolutely loves the job he is doing, and so is quite hesitant to retire. Despite that, he does still wonder whether he's becoming too old and tired to continue with the job that he loves so much. I feel like this is a very real struggle many people, especially older folk, go through, and that's the reason why I feel like this film is so good for both kids and adults, which is important because we all know that animation is for everyone, and anyone who says otherwise is just wrong. This dilemma with Malcolm over his age helps to make him feel incredibly human, and ends up separating him as a person from his job as Santa. This is important because many people who have well-known and beloved legacies often suffer from the fact that at the end of the day, they are real people, separate from how they're perceived. This is where idolization comes in. Malcolm is not a perfect person. He's often forgetful, he's not that respectful towards Arthur, and as I previously mentioned, he's getting too old and tired to worry much about Gwen. Despite this, he is clearly portrayed as a loving but flawed character, as he does still care about people, especially his wife Margaret. I haven't yet mentioned Margaret, played by Imelda Staunton, in this video, as she isn't that relevant to this analysis, but I just want to say that I do still love her, and the relationship between Malcolm and Margaret is so wholesome. All of this means that Malcolm is not the kind of person to be idolized as much as he is. In fact, no one should be idolized that much. I think that as a result of all of this, Malcolm is quite possibly the most interesting and realistic Santa Claus character from a film. He's got depth, he's got flaws, and he is a person at the end of the day who has normal and understandable faults. However, this eventual realization that Malcolm is a flawed person upsets Arthur at first, until he realizes that in order to keep a legacy going, the most important thing to do is to keep the spirit and love going instead of relying on and idolizing the same person who isn't perfect. But at the end of the day, no one person is perfect. The importance of keeping the heart and soul of something is emphasized many times in this film, and I even mentioned it in the last segment, as that is what ultimately leads to Arthur becoming the new Santa, because he is the most passionate about Christmas. Meanwhile, at the same time, Malcolm realizes his flaws as a person, especially as a father, and goes to Gwen's house, but this is less to deliver the present and continue his legacy, but more so as a way to help Arthur and show him some much needed appreciation, which is what he should be doing as a father first and foremost. It's Malcolm essentially letting go of his legacy and idolization to be himself once again, and is now instead a loving husband and father. Meanwhile, Arthur continues the legacy of the job Malcolm loves so much because of the joy it spreads to many people. This change in his character is perfectly encapsulated when he lets Arthur be the one who places the present by the tree, and then he congratulates both his boys as they watch the joy brought by his legacy, and oh my god, this movie is so wholesome. So overall, Arthur Christmas is once again a perfect Christmas movie, because the Christmas holiday emphasizes the toxicity of idolization, even if legacies can bring joy to people. I think it works so well because Santa Claus is one of the most idolized people ever, so using him as a catalyst to deliver this very mature message works so well, and is another reason why I love this movie as much as I do. In conclusion, Arthur Christmas is a perfect Christmas movie, and there's a reason why it's my absolute favourite. Some people may disagree with this being the best Christmas movie and say that the likes of Die Hard and It's a Wonderful Life are better. However, for me, whilst they are still Christmas movies, Christmas isn't a major part of those movies, and I can watch both of them at any point in the year, whereas Arthur Christmas is a much better Christmas movie in my opinion. Not only is it funny and memorable as well as endlessly creative, but its main messages on traditions and legacies are perfect for the holiday season. If you haven't seen it, please check it out, as I think it is an underrated gem. It's really big here in the UK, but outside of the country, it isn't all that well known, so please give it a watch this holiday season. There's a reason I uploaded this video a few days before Christmas, as I wanted to give you all time to check it out for Christmas yourself. But for now, I hope you enjoyed my first full film analysis. Be sure to let me know what you think of this kind of video and whether I should do more. I've got plenty of films I want to have a look at, so any feedback here would be appreciated. Anyway, Merry Christmas everyone,